For the first time since Andrew Luck's retirement, the Indianapolis Colts have found their quarterback. Welcome into this second episode of this series. We're reviewing every position group on the Indianapolis Colts, reviewing their performance from 2023, seeing what we can take away and hopefully improve heading into 2024. Last week, we went over the O-line and ultimately gave it a 7.75 out of 10. Today, of course, we're getting to quarterbacks, the most important position in football for the Colts. That means Anthony Richardson, Gardner Minshew, and Sam Ehlinger, at least at the time of recording this video. We'll see how long that quarterback room stays intact. Let's get right into it. First and foremost, Anthony Richardson is more than likely our franchise quarterback. Of course, he only played in 3, 4, 5 games, so we really don't know what he looks like over the course of an entire season as a starting quarterback in the NFL yet to this point. But Anthony Richardson is more than likely going to be the guy. He obviously is on his rookie contract. We're going to have him on this team guaranteed until 2027, maybe 2028 if we pick up his fifth-year option. The long story short is just that we don't need to worry about Anthony Richardson leaving this team anytime soon. And based on what we saw so far this season, particularly the Rams game, it seems like he's going to be a great addition to this team and pan out perfectly. Now, AR's stats are actually very telling, even though he only played in 4 games, most of which he didn't even finish. He ended the year with 50 completions on 84 attempts, and that's a 59% completion percentage overall. That is not good, all right? It's simply not. There's no way to get around that. 59% is not the number that we're looking for in that particular category. Most quarterbacks fall in the 60% range. AR is actually outside the top 40 in this category, at least for quarterbacks that meet the minimum snap requirement. Richardson, by the way, does not meet the minimum snap requirement, but it's still a notable talking point and a notable stat. It's undeniable that his passing game still needs time to develop, and that'll come with time, right? It's his rookie year. He's going to be in his sophomore season in 2024. You can't expect him to be Peyton Manning on day one. Now, especially in week one, Richardson was given a very simple game plan, a lot of crossers or maybe designed quick passes or designed QB runs. Basically, Richardson was told what to do and he did it. And that's something that we see a lot with young quarterbacks in this league, especially if they're asked to start on day one. In the Rams game, though, he unleashed the deep ball, ripped off multiple throws for large gains a significant amount of times in that game as we were trying to mount that second half comeback, and we succeeded in forcing it to go to overtime. Some of those throws were just completely unbelievable. But AR still makes his fair share of mistakes. Mostly as far as pocket decision making goes, he seems to be doing pretty well considering it's the fact that it's his rookie year, first time facing NFL defenses, all of those things. Mostly his decision making issues come in the form of recklessness. Frequently, Richardson will attempt some kind of acrobatic throw that seems humanly impossible, and sometimes he makes those throws. Sure, we saw him do it in the Rams game, but on that ridiculous throw, we saw him sting his shoulder, right? It's moments like that where Anthony Richardson tries to make a play that isn't there, make a ridiculous acrobatic throw, and sometimes that play is made, but the throws are just a little bit too low percentage to be considered worth the risk of injury. In the run game, we see this exact same problem of recklessness too. The best example is the Texans game in week 2, where in the first half of that one, he drives directly into head-on contact with the Texans defender. Sure, gets the touchdown, but that was the play that likely concussed him and caused him to miss more time. And so we see moments like that where he's risking his body for a play way more than I think it's acceptable to, considering the fact that he's a young quarterback on a team that doesn't have the number one offensive line in the league or anything like that. We talked about that last week. You never want to see a guy get hurt. Sure, it's great that he has the dedication and the resilience to go for that first down, go for the end zone, go for the goal line, but it just doesn't seem like the discipline is there to know that maybe that play isn't worth making. Maybe it's better to just throw it away here. Maybe it's better to just run out of bounds here, something like that. Because AR's recklessness caused him to miss time and miss games on multiple occasions and ultimately miss the entire season. That being said, Richardson did tell the media himself, like last week, that he plans to play more conservatively and play more intelligently next year to try to preserve his body and preserve the longevity of his season. Obviously, it's great that we know that he's aware of this problem and is going to try to improve that in the offseason and moving on into next season. Hopefully, it's not as significant of an issue that we saw this time, Hopefully, he's not out for the season like he was this past year. We'll just have to wait and see. So, in summary, his passing game does still need time to develop, and that will come with time as his precision and his decision making, and even just his general comfort in the offense will improve in the coming years. And especially next season, we're going to see a lot about Anthony Richardson because as Shane Steichen sort of involves him in this offense more and presents him with more complicated concepts against better defenses, right? We'll see how Richardson can handle the rigor of NFL defenses early on in his career. Last season, we definitely saw his confidence and quality of play rise as the season went on, as he got more time and was in on more games, right? The Jaguars game in week one, very conservative. A lot of checkdowns, a lot of designed quick passes, which is fine, right? That's designed, that's done on purpose by Shane Steichen, of course, our head coach, because you want to ease your starting quarterback into things, right? It would be great if you had a surefire starter already on the roster, right? That way they can really be eased in and really learn without being thrown into the fire. You're not just going to throw your quarterback straight into the fire. You're going to sort of ease them in, give them some more simple concepts on offense so that they're not completely overwhelmed by the defense, they're not completely overwhelmed by the moment, things like that. But we saw as we got into the Rams game, right, later on in that season, he was way more confident and his quality of play was way higher. Unleash the deep ball, things like that. I expect that trend of improvement throughout the season to continue as we roll into 2024. Either way, he has a lot of potential. We all can agree on that. If he can sort of improve his ability to read defenses and tackle those complicated concepts, Anthony Richardson could be a top 10 quarterback in the league. We'll have to see if that ends up panning out. We'll have to see if that ends up working out for us. Either way, his running ability and astounding athleticism is going to be a joy to watch. If we're having a real conversation with one another, Gardner Minshew was essentially our starting quarterback for the vast majority of last season. And let's move on from Richardson and talk about Gardner Minshew. He ended the year with 13 starts and taking over for Anthony Richardson. Ultimately, Minshew posted a 62% completion percentage with 3,305 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. None of those stats are particularly eye popping, which is fine, right? He's a backup quarterback for a reason. I happen to be of the belief that he's one of the best, if not the best, backup quarterbacks in the entire league. Joe Flacco is going to have something to say about that. But regardless, Gardner Minshew is one of the best backups in the league. He's proven that he can be a solid starter the entire season. We lost our starting quarterback, and still, this Colts team was a game away from the playoffs. That is an incredible feat, no matter which way you look at it. I think Minshew is a coveted member of this team and someone that we should prioritize bringing back. Now, it's important to note that Minshew is in his contract year. We signed him onto this team just last offseason to a 1-year deal, right? So we have to make a decision now on whether or not we're going to pay him and bring him back or let him walk away to another team or maybe the UFL for all we know. The Colts have a lot of stars on this team that need to be re-signed. I mean, just off the top of my head, you got Michael Pittman Jr., DeForest Buckner, Kenny Moore, Grover Stewart, all of them. They all need to be re-signed. Gardner Minshew is included in that list. And because there's so many stars and because there's just, quite frankly, better players than Gardner Minshew out there that we need to re-sign, Minshew may fall by the wayside. With that said, the Colts have the fourth most cap space in the entire league, and I think we're going to have no problem re-signing the majority of those stars that I mentioned before. But nonetheless, Minshew should be a coveted member of this team and someone that we, like I said, prioritize bringing back. Anthony Richardson may simply be injury prone. We have no idea if he's going to have the same issues next season, and I'm not 100% sure that Sam Ehlinger should be our QB2. I'm not 100% sure that we should try to bring in someone else. That might be a little bit too expensive. If we can bring Gardner Minshew back, we should bring Gardner Minshew back. If there are, if there's not enough money to go around and we just can't keep him there, and because we need to bring back Kenny Moore, DeForest Buckner, all the players I mentioned before, that's fine too. I'm okay either way, but I would really love to see Gardner Minshew on this team again next season. Minshew, as I said before, is simply good enough. Sure, he does throw more interceptions than I would like him to, but I talked before about how part of that falls on the offensive line and effective front sevens just completely rushing his progression and overwhelming Minshew's ability to throw an accurate pass. We see the likelihood of inaccurate throws or poor decisions increase every time they're playing against an effective front seven, especially if the offensive line is having a bad day. It doesn't all fall on Minshew, but sure, he does throw a few too many interceptions. He does make a few too many mistakes. He's simply a good enough quarterback and can fill in for this team and keep them afloat. Minshew has his handicaps and he does have a hard ceiling, right? You're not going to see him put up an MVP performance, but he's good enough. He's consistent, he's solid, he's never atrocious. He's also never MVP level, and honestly, that's okay. It's a way better situation at QB2 than a lot of other teams are in. There's a lot of other teams in the league where if they lose their starting quarterback, their season's over, right? It's done. The Jets were like that, where I don't know if they would have gotten the playoffs with Aaron Rodgers, but when he went down, it was out of the question, right? The Colts are not necessarily in that situation with the roster that we have around our quarterback and Gardner Minshew being our QB2. All right, let's talk about Sam Ehlinger. The man can run, he can throw it deep, and he can send jolts of electricity through a stagnant offense. Listen, I'm a really, really big fan of Sam Ehlinger. He has something that a lot of other quarterbacks, including Gardner Minshew, don't have, and that's that electricity. That's that shock value. He ripped off a 44-yard touchdown run in the preseason against Tampa before. He makes ridiculous deep throws as well. We saw him do that at Texas all the time. He's so fun to watch and so great. He's probably one of the best QB3s in the league, which isn't necessarily an accomplishment of any kind, but Sam Ehlinger being on this team is so fun and so enjoyable to me. That running ability and ability to throw the ball deep are really his best qualities by far. And with that said, he is doing this against preseason defenses. We don't really see him play in the regular season very much, but against those preseason defenses, young players or non starters that are a little bit lower on the depth chart, we don't really know how well he would do against a starting defense, but also an elite starting defense, one of the better in the league once we get into the playoffs, right? So, elite pass rushers and elite secondaries. It's yet to be seen how well Sam Ehlinger would perform in a high pressure situation like that because the preseason, of course, is the opposite of high pressure. Sam Ehlinger, we're not really going to ask him to play in a playoff game. We're not going to ask him to, really play in any game, hopefully, most likely. But he's exciting to watch. Either way, Ehlinger, in my opinion, is totally capable of being a second string quarterback. Now, like I said, he's never faced an elite defense before in his life in the NFL, so we really have no idea how he would perform if thrust into a stressful situation like that. But if for some reason we fail to re sign Gardner Minshew, Sam Ehlinger can be a competent QB2 and give us some level of success. Sure, I would be a little bit concerned, a little disappointed, maybe a little worried about the fact that we lost Gardner Minshew, but Sam Ehlinger is not going to burn the building to the ground if we make him start, if Anthony Richardson were to get hurt and Gardner Minshew were to be not on the team anymore. Now, with that said, if we're going into a wild card game in Houston, for example, and Sam Ehlinger is starting, the season is probably over. But, it's not going to be a complete disaster if Sam Ehlinger has to start for this team. Granted, hopefully, Anthony Richardson never gets hurt and Gardner Minshew stays on the team and we re sign all of our stars and we have no problems and the season is great and we go 17-0 and win the Super Bowl. But that's not how football works. You all know that. And Sam Ehlinger may very well be our second string quarterback in 2024. But I'm not 100% sure that Ehlinger is going to perform well if forced into a QB2 situation where he has to come into a game in the regular season. But if that's what we have to resort to, if we have to resort to Ehlinger being our QB2 and maybe starting games if Anthony Richardson were to get hurt, I think I'm okay with that. Anthony Richardson is our franchise quarterback and should be for years to come. His contract expires in 2027, maybe 2028 if we pick up the fifth year option, which I imagine we will. Gardner Minshew is a free agent this offseason. If we need to re sign him, we have to do it now. Sam Ehlinger, his contract expires in 2025. That's next offseason. So he's going to be presumably on this team this season in 2024. After that, then we would have to re sign him. So the longevity of this quarterback room is largely uncertain because we have maybe Gardner Minshew leaving this team this year and maybe Sam Ehlinger leaving this team next year. If we lose them both, that's probably a worst case scenario for the quarterback room. But for 2024, for this season, regardless of whether or not we re sign Gardner Minshew, I feel great about this position group. Overall, I'd give this group a 9.25 out of 10. We're in a much, much better spot than a lot of other teams in the league are. We have a franchise quarterback. We know who our quarterback is going to be next year, which is something that not every team, even not even every team in the top 5 picks of the draft, not even they can say. We don't know about the Bears. We don't know about the Broncos, who their quarterback is going to be, right? The Raiders, even. So we have our franchise quarterback. And then on top of that, at least for now, a reliable QB2 and a considerably strong QB3. The only reasons I don't give this group a 10 is because, well, we don't know if Gardner Minshew is returning next season. Anthony Richardson may be very injury prone, and we have no idea what Sam Ehlinger looks like against real NFL defenses. So there are problems with this group. There are concerns with this group, red flags per se, but I give it a 9.25 out of 10. I feel great about the situation we're in. I don't feel that any off-season changes or off-season moves are necessary. Of course, if we fail to re-sign Gardner Minshew, then we have other problems. I think that's our top priority for the quarterback room, obviously. But we do have other concerns around this team. I want to bring back Kenny Moore. I want to bring back DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart, right? That's both of our defensive tackles that could potentially not be on this team next year if we fail to re-sign them. Again, I think we'll have no problem with that. Michael Pittman Jr., obviously a huge weapon on offense that we want to re-sign. The list goes on, right? There are plenty of players that the Colts need to bring back for next season. And Gardner Minshew just isn't number one, number two, or number three on that list. So if we can't re sign him because of that, that's okay. And hopefully, either way, Anthony Richardson is healthy the whole season and we don't have a problem with that. Worst case scenario, Sam Ehlinger can step in, or maybe we grab a third quarterback late in the draft or somewhere else in the league just to sort of restore that depth if Gardner Minshew ends up walking away. Either way, I feel great about this position group. It gets a 9.25 out of 10. Certainly, I feel way better about this group than I do the offensive line. And the offense is looking good so far as we get through these position group reviews. Thank you for watching this far into the video. Feel free to hit like and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Next week, we're going to talk about the receivers and tight ends on this team and do essentially the same thing that we did for this episode, but for the receivers and tight ends. Not all of them as in-depth as we did with the quarterbacks because we only have 3 quarterbacks. But, talk about the depth, talk about the starters. It'll look more like the O-line video. That should come out next Saturday at noon, the same time that this one will be coming out. Either way, I'm very excited about this offseason. I feel great about this Colts team moving into 2024 so far. We'll see if that continues to be the case as I go through with the receivers and tight ends. I imagine it will. Either way, thank you for watching. Enjoy this weekend's playoff football from the Colts perspective.